Okay, we're taking you live to West Jerusalem, where the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and they're just about to speak to the press. And here they go. Let's listen in.
My dear friend Marco, it's great to welcome you in Jerusalem with your delegation. It's great to welcome you in Jerusalem as Secretary of State of the United States. I have to say that this visit comes in the wake of a historic visit to Washington. I've said and I'm going to repeat it again because it's so true. President Trump is the greatest friend that Israel has ever had in the White House. And the visit in Washington reflected that in every way, and your visit here reflects it in every way. Throughout your political career, you've been a great supporter of Israel and a great champion of the U.S.-Israel alliance. I have no doubt that your unwavering support will continue during your tenure as Secretary of State, and I also have no doubt that you'll be a voice of clarity and courage on the world stage for the values that we in Israel, you in America hold dear, the values of freedom for all those who cherish liberty. You're already doing that, and I want to tell you that it's heard loud and clear here and everywhere else. Today, Secretary Rubio and I had a very productive discussion with our staffs on a number of issues. None of them are more important than Iran. Israel and America stand shoulder to shoulder in countering the threat of Iran. We agreed that the Ayatollahs must not have nuclear weapons. And we also agreed that Iran's aggression in the region has to be rolled back. Over the last 16 months, Israel has dealt a mighty blow to Iran's terror axis. Under the strong leadership of President Trump and with your unflinching support, I have no doubt that we can and will finish the job. We also spoke a great deal about Gaza. I thank Secretary Rubio for President Trump's assistance in helping us secure the release of another 3 hostages yesterday. These are hostages that Hamas refused to support only a few days to release only a few days earlier. And I also thanked him for America's unequivocal backing for Israel's policy in Gaza in moving forward. I want to assure everyone who's now listening to us, President Trump and I are working in full cooperation and coordination between us. We have a common strategy, and we can't always share the details of this strategy with the public, including when the gates of hell will be opened, as they surely will if all our hostages are not released until the last one of them. Israel is determined to achieve all the war objectives we set after the horrific attack on October 7th, the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. We will eliminate Hamas's military capability and its political rule in Gaza. We will bring all our hostages home, and we will ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel. The unequivocal support of the United States on Gaza will help us achieve these objectives faster and set us on a path for a different future. Secretary Rubio and I discussed President Trump's bold vision for Gaza, for Gaza's future, how we can work together to ensure that that future becomes a reality. We also discussed the situation in Syria after the collapse of Assad's regime, a collapse that was made possible by Israel's weakening of Iran's terror axis, especially the weakening of Hezbollah and the removal of Nasrallah. For over a decade before October 7th, Israel acted to prevent Iran from developing new terror fronts against us in Syria, right opposite the Golan Heights and deeper in Syria. And we conducted hundreds of airstrikes, perhaps 1,000, in order to prevent it, and we did. Now, if any other force in Syria today believes that Israel will permit other hostile forces to use Syria as a base of operations against us, they are gravely mistaken. Israel will act to prevent any threat from emerging near our border in southwest Syria. The Secretary and I discussed Lebanon as well. Israel is committed to the ceasefire understandings that were reached in November. We expect the government of Lebanon to be equally committed to their fulfillment. The scenes we saw this weekend in Beirut of UNIFIL forces being attacked by Hezbollah this was not encouraging. The two UN resolutions that everyone refers to, 1559, 1709, 1701, well, they must be fully implemented. Hezbollah must be disarmed. And Israel would prefer that the Lebanese army do that job. But no one should doubt that Israel will do what it has to do to enforce the understandings of the ceasefire and defend our security. The Secretary and I also discussed how the many international institutions have been hijacked and turned into anti-American and anti-Israeli forums. We see that in the UN General Assembly, in the UN Human Rights Commission, where anti-Americanism is rampant, and more resolutions are passed about Israel than the rest of the world combined. And we see it especially in the lawfare that is being waged against America and Israel at the ICC, the ICJ, and elsewhere. The ICC has outrageously libeled Israel and issued arrest warrants based on utter lies. Like America, Israel is not subject to the jurisdiction of the ICC and does not accept the court's authority. Israel commends President Trump and his administration for restoring his executive order against the ICC and for moving quickly to sanction ICC officials. The Secretary and I discussed working together to formulate a common strategy to deal with the threat of lawfare and neutralize this threat once and for all. So these are some of the issues we discussed today. Believe it or not, there were more, many more. We can say that the Middle East today has many opportunities, many challenges, and we think we can realize the opportunities and also meet the challenges. And I have no doubt that working together, America and Israel will overcome the challenges and seize the opportunities. I have to say that I'm absolutely confident that under President Trump's leadership and working together with you, Secretary Rubio, Marco, the best days of our alliance are still yet to come. Welcome to Jerusalem. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. It is an honor to be back here. I've been here many times before as an American visiting and then as a member of the United States Senate, but now for the first time as the Secretary of State of the United States, and it's an honor to be here. And it's an honor to serve in this role on behalf of President Donald Trump, who, as you've accurately stated, Mr. Prime Minister, is a tremendous friend of Israel. There's been no stronger ally for Israel in the White House than President Trump. He's also a man that speaks clearly and unambiguously and makes clear his views on issues. The first he's made clear is, and as you've pointed out, and the hostages need to come home, they need to be released, and you work in very close coordination with him. He's working in very close coordination, but with the Prime Minister and his government in ensuring that that happens. That must happen. It's not optional. And would add that that's a goal we share in common, and that is something we work on very closely together. The President's also been very bold about his view of what the future for Gaza should be. Not the same tired ideas of the past, but something that's new, bold, and something that frankly took courage and vision in order to outline. And it may have shocked and surprised many, but what cannot continue is the same cycle where we repeat over and over again and wind up in the exact same place. Related to that, the President's been very clear. Hamas cannot continue as a military or government force. And frankly, as long as it stands as a force that can govern or as a force that can administer or as a force that can threaten by use of violence, peace becomes impossible. They must be eliminated. They must be eradicated. On the broader issues that we discussed as well is the questions in Syria. And while the fall of Assad is certainly promising and important, if Syria replacing one destabilizing force for another is not a positive development. And that is something that we will watch very carefully as we seek to craft our own strategy with regards to how to approach the events in Syria. In the case of Lebanon, our goals are aligned and the same. A strong Lebanese state that can take on and disarm Hezbollah. The common theme in all of these challenges is Iran. It is the single greatest source of instability in the region. Behind every terrorist group, behind every act of violence, behind every destabilizing activity, behind everything that threatens peace and stability for the millions of people who call this region home, is Iran. And by Iran, I mean the Ayatollahs. By Iran, I mean its regime. A regime who, by the way, its people don't support. The people of Iran are victims of that regime. And so I think it's important to constantly point that whether we talk about Hamas or we talk about Hezbollah or we talk about violence in the West Bank or we talk about destabilization in Syria or we talk about any of these issues, the militias in Iraq, they all have behind them one common theme: Iran. And that must be addressed. And there can never be a nuclear Iran. A nuclear Iran that could then hold itself immune from pressure and from action. That can never happen. The president's been clear about that as well. And so I close where I began by reiterating our strong support for our allies, very close allies and partners here in Israel, to the people of this great country, for whom we have tremendous love and respect for everything you're facing, have faced, and continue to face. It is an extraordinary story of bravery. A nation founded in the ashes and in the aftermath of a horrifying crime against humanity, stood from its very inception, from the very day of its birth, against threats from every angle and every corner, and has served as an example to the world of a pluralistic society, a free enterprise democracy, and one that if there were more Israels in the Middle East, more countries like that, the world would be a safer and a better place. And this is what we hope for the region and for our planet. A nation that's always sought peace, but will not allow itself to be intimidated or destroyed by its enemies. And on that front, you can always count on us, as long as I'm in this position and President Trump is in the White House. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, are you committed to negotiating?
Okay, so not taking any questions. That was the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who, as you can see, has been visiting West Jerusalem. He's been holding talks with Netanyahu. Netanyahu describing the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, as a great supporter of Israel, and Rubio, in return, giving his unwavering support to Israel. Netanyahu saying that President Trump is the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House. And both gentlemen didn't shy away from attacking Iran out front. So the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he had very productive discussions with Rubio, none more important than regarding Iran. On Gaza, both men said that they are working together. Netanyahu says that Trump and I, rather, are working in full cooperation and coordination when it comes to Gaza, and that Israel is determined to achieve its Gaza war objectives, and that we will eliminate Hamas's military capacity. That is according to Netanyahu. We'll bring in Hamdah Salhut, joining us from Jordan's capital, Amman, because the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority have banned Al Jazeera from reporting in Israel on the occupied West Bank. So, like I was saying, Hamdah, I mean, they didn't waste any time in sort of pivoting to Iran and sending a direct message to Iran. What do you think the takeaway message from all of that was?
Well, the takeaway message here is that the American president is a staunch supporter of Israel. His administration are big Israel supporters. They were previously, before their cabinet positions with the American administration. They talked about Iran. They talked about Lebanon. They talked about Syria. They talked about all of the military activity that Israel is conducting across the region. But they also talked about Gaza. But what was absent there was the inclusion of the Palestinians. This has been absent from any American plan and from any Israeli plan. Netanyahu says that he's going to defeat Hamas both militarily and politically, but this was one of his war goals, one of his main objectives, that after 15 months of fighting completely failed. You see Hamas every week at these captives released in a big show of force with their fighters brandishing weapons, and it's something within Israel that drives the right wing crazy, because they say after 15 months of fighting, the Israeli military was not able to achieve these goals. They say that they still want the release of the remaining captives and that they are trying to work that out. They also said they want to implement Trump's plan that has been widely condemned in the region for for the U.S. takeover of Gaza, saying that there hasn't been any sort of plan that has been brought to the table for things to be different, for things to bring about peace. But again, absent here was the role of the Palestinians. Absent here was any sort of plan for the Palestinian people other than expelling them for their land. So U.S. President Donald Trump has said he's a staunch supporter of Israel. In fact, yesterday there was just another shipment of weapons to Israel. These are ones that were blocked by the Biden administration as the war was ongoing, but President Trump had signed off on them. They arrived late last night into the Israeli port. So it just goes to show you that this American administration is very pro-Israel, and they say they're going to support Israel however they see fit, whether it's defending borders all across Syria, Lebanon. And he also mentioned the West Bank, which is interesting, talking about the unrest in the West Bank, but not talking about the Palestinians who've been killed or the tens of thousands who've been displaced as a result of these Israeli raids.
Hamdah, on that note, on that point you were making about Trump's plan, so the Israeli Prime Minister said that he discussed with Rubio, quote, what they're calling the bold vision of Trump for Gaza's future. So presumably when Marco Rubio now comes to the region, his first trip as the U.S. Secretary of State, he either has to firm up or water down that Trump plan. Did we get an idea of which direction he'll be taking?
This is a firm support for President Donald Trump's plan to essentially expel Palestinians, for the United States to own the Gaza Strip and to create what he called the Riviera of the Middle East, to expel Palestinians to Jordan and Egypt. But both countries had said they were not going to accept that. Countries in the region, the Arab League, have all denounced this plan, saying that the United States cannot insert itself and occupy Palestinian land, especially while it is still under this ceasefire deal that still, by the way, is quite sensitive. We're not sure if it's going to move on to phase 1 or phase 2. It's clear there are talks going on behind the scenes between American mediators and the Israelis about what's to come next, because the official Israeli delegation has not been negotiating for phase 2, even though as part of phase 1 on day 16, which we are well past, those negotiations were supposed to happen. So the Israelis are seeking now to extend phase 1, perhaps for a return to the fighting, because they say they cannot defeat Hamas both politically and militarily unless it's through military means. So it's a little bit unclear about exactly what's next, but this position of the United States taking over Gaza has been solidified by the U.S. Secretary of State's visit.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.